Hello, my name is Noelle Adler and I'm clinical lead at Somerset Counselling Centre. And I'm going to be working today with my friend and colleague Simon Peck, who's also a therapist both in private practice and at SCC. So hello Simon, and thank you so much for working with me today on this subject. I'm going to begin with my usual little spiel about the topic. And the topic today, the module today, is on uncertainty. I know. It's a massive subject. It's a very poignant subject for this moment in our lives. And it's one I find I personally struggle with. I know I feel very anxious about being uncertain and I lose trust and I feel a bit wobbly and I really don't like it. And, there's a reason for that when we're in a certain place, we have a familiarity. Now, the moment there is change, we move into transition. And the moment we move into transition, we move into uncertainty. So uncertainty is inevitable. It is an inevitable fact of life. And that bridge where we are uncertain, because we've moved from the familiar and we haven't yet arrived at a known place or a clear place or another familiar place, is the bit we're going to be talking about today. What we do to ourselves in that place. So as I said, uncertainty for me is not an easy thing. However, uncertainty for my dear husband is a much sought after thing. So he really can't bear the void and he doesn't like getting bored. So what he'll do is manufacture change. And he'll manufacture uncertainty. So why would you possibly drive around the M25 with a full tank? Yeah, why would you do that? When you could do it with 2 bits of fume in it in the petrol tank and your wife next to you rummaging around for the AA card and watching the needle on the fuel. Why would you? Why would you? So, of course, for Graham, that uncertain state fills him with adrenaline, fills the void, fills the gap. And then, of course, we do actually get petrol. Thank you. And sweet relief. Sweet relief. So for him, it's a marvelous place. For me, particularly when I'm catapulted, which we all have been this year, the nation this year has been catapulted into uncertainty. Usually when we evoke change, there is automatically uncertainty, but it's usually not as difficult because we've had a time to psychologically prepare. We've fantasized about it. We've thought about it. We've prepared for it. We've rehearsed for it. What happened this year is that the nation was catapulted from one place that we thought we were in right into another place. And it really wasn't our choice. This was not our choice. So that is uncertainty at its worst. There's trauma, there's lack of choice, there's lack of preparation. And I know for myself that when I am catapulted into that kind of uncertainty, it's like a power cut. I feel really anxious. I can't see, I can't think, I don't know where I am. And I even lose my feet. I think, where are my feet? Where are my feet? What's going on? And of course, evolutionarily speaking, we were developed to seek to know it because it's not good. It's not safe for us not to know for too long, because we need to know where our food's coming from. We need to know who's at the cave door. We need to know how to make a fire. We need to know. So what happened? I mean, it's very, very clever. Our brains developed a seeking part, which is called the ventral striatum or the ventral striatum, however you want to say it. But those little striatum in the seeking part of the brain get switched on, and it's automatic. You don't have a choice about it. So that's great. Automatic, switched on, and then you go hunting. You go hunting for the answer. So that's great, because the upside to that is that you excrete dopamine, and we quite like doing that as human beings. It makes us feel better. So when we are feeling very lost and very uncertain and very unsure, which is very much actually part of the learning process, that part of our brain, ventral striatum, turns on, and we will seek, and it will stay on until we find some resolution. So evolutionarily, we've been gifted something to help us. However, of course, we have emotional states which we lop onto uncertainty. So what Simon and I want to look at is how internally we react to the state and how we can help ourselves by unhitching perhaps very negative thoughts from that state so that we don't get pushed about by uncertainty too much. There are a few little things before I go over to Simon and we have our conversation that I want to debunk. I can't resist it. One is when you hear people say, I don't know, I don't know, I just don't know. That is not being uncertain. The I don't know statement is an avoidance statement. It's a statement when we don't want to face something, we can't face something, we go into camouflage, we simply want to avoid. So I don't know is not about being uncertain. The other, of course, the other favorite of mine is that uncertainty, as I said, is inevitable and it is universal. As humankind, we will go through uncertainty. And it's difficult in our culture because we've been groomed to be certain. We've got to appear certain, because when we appear certain, we appear strong and we appear knowing, even though we may not know and we don't know what's going on. So what I'm going to ask you is please don't buy into that too much, because it is the route to La La Land. It is much better if we can face the monster head on and have some ideas and tools and with ways of dealing with it. I'm going to go over now to my colleague Simon. Hi, Simon. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Noel.
Hi.
Hi. So, Noel, I've been thinking about what the real purpose of the module is, and to not get stuck on just the word uncertain. And it sounds like the invitation is for us to explore what the monster is, as you just said, and to understand what lies beneath uncertainty and the psychological processes that are going on. Is that what we're here to do?
Thank you. Thank you for putting me on track, Simon. Absolutely. We're looking at our internal responses to this situation, to this state. And like you, Simon, I've noticed a split response whereby either people are a bit like me, where let's just go to bed for a year, put our head in the sand and pretend it's not happening, or the more paranoid state, which is about let's pretend it's fake. This is a fake pandemic. Actually, we're not in danger. And we just then, from that place, we weave our own story about it. And I think we do that. It is illusory, but I think we do it to try and get some control in a place where we have lost control.
So it's sounding like uncertainty is morphing into something else, and something else is emerging.
I think it does. That's exactly it, Simon. And at this point, I'd like to put it back to you and say, could you talk to us a little bit about how your uncertainty morphs? What happens to you in this state?
When I reflect, what happens when I have realized I've been in an uncertain place or time, I realize that I become maybe anxious, worried, sometimes fearful. But the overriding thing that seems to crop up and get me is a feeling of incompetence, of not being competent and in control. And there's something that's really uncomfortable about that. Noel, you've already alluded to the point that we want to be in control, we want to be knowing. Uncertainty seems to rob me of that. And maybe that's a part of my monster.
Yes, Simon. So let's think, you used a very interesting word, competence, which means with power. So competence. Tell me for you, Simon, what you mean by that word.
feel more assured when I'm feeling competent and more in control and able to weather what's going on around me. When I'm feeling incompetent and in this place of uncertainty, I experience what I now know to be parts of me that can easily want to withdraw. I find myself becoming frozen. I can hide. I may want to duck something. And that sense of withdrawing. However, I can also recognize that at times, I won't say this, but there's something within me that actually wants to lash out, that wants to shout at something about the maybe injustice, about why this elusive thing. Of course, it's elusive. It's uncertain. This way of being, and I can find myself stuck in those positions of wanting to withdraw or feeling I want to shout.
So yes, I mean that's very interesting. In therapy, we call those states a freeze state, so stopping, wanting to withdraw, or the protest state. And protesting is a really important part of our development. So, but what you're describing is something in uncertainty for you is very undermining. That these two states, which we might call the superego and the id. So the id is the one that wants to protest, and the superego is the more critical or parental voice that's coming in and perhaps being a bit oppressive.
Yes, oppressive. This is something that, again, through my own therapy and space to reflect, I've become aware that when I'm feeling uncertain and unsure, and I want to use another word actually, because it feels at times there's danger around me, and at these times there is this other hitherto unknown voice that Noah, you've just labelled as the superego, that is crushing. It's telling me what to do, or shoulds and oughts, and it's not very helpful. It's not supportive. It's not looking after the part of me that wants to hide or the part of me that wants to protest.
You're doing a lovely job here of introducing the idea of the id, the ego, and the superego. And in psychotherapy terms, the id is also known as the kid. The ego is our adult part. So the adult part would negotiate for Simon between the bit that wanted to protest and the bit that was very critical and crushing. The critical part of us, the superego, can also be called the parent or the critical parent. Now, we have a little film for you that is going to take you through these states, and then Simon and I are going to continue our conversation. Welcome. This is an introduction to the id, the ego, and the superego. These are well used and known terms in psychoanalysis. We want to introduce you to them as they can be helpful in getting to know the different parts of you. These terms are also called the kid, the adult, the parent, or critical parent. I like to call them other names too. Meet my id, also known as jelly baby or baby. My ego, magnificent and strong, also known as the acrobat. She straddles my id and superego. Meet the superego or parent or critical parent. On patrol. but not too bad. Oh, here she comes. So this is the really aggressive part of my critical self. Keeps me stuck and frightened. So she's called the policeman and she's called the gangster. Have a go at naming yours. Remember, all the parts of you have something to offer. The aim is to get them to work together. A bit like an orchestra. Your id may have many feelings. Your ego is the strong bridge and negotiator. Your superego is trying to stop you making mistakes. It can go too far. It can be critical and persecutory. They all have a role. They are all important. They can learn to work together. When they do, there is wisdom, harmony, and possibility. So Simon, there were those three states that we've invited people to look at for themselves. And so now I'm going to invite you just to introduce us to your three states a little bit more.
Okay, let me do this with an example that I experienced in a working environment. So my example is when I was not in this therapeutic world, but I was working as a leader of a smallish organization. And I knew the organization was struggling for its place, its relevance, and actually its survival. And my head, and I want to stress that, my head knew the right thing to do. I had real clarity around what to do. However, my heart, or my emotional self, started to rear up, and it was really confused and uncertain. The company, the organization, was in a very uncertain, volatile phase. I had clarity, but emotionally I was thrown into this place of absolute uncertainty. Should I do this? What if I do this? What if I do that? And I felt very alone. So emotionally, I'm gripped with uncertainty, in part due to the clarity I have actually and the consequences of my plan. At that point, my old ways of coping, my old coping strategies really kicked in. And of course, I now know that they are not so helpful. So thinking of my id in that example, that child part of me was quietly screaming. It was screaming as if it was saying, help me, show me. Yeah. And it was also quietly raging. What about me? This is difficult. Don't abandon me. Come and be supportive. So my child felt ill-equipped and abandoned. And actually, Noelle, that's how I often felt as a child. At that time, my superego then piles on the pressure. As if it could speak, it was probably saying something like, no matter what you do, you're going to fail anyway. You're not going to make the right decision. You're not going to come up trumps. You're going to disappoint everybody. Now, this organization had real people who were also really struggling with the reality of the situation and the change that was on the horizon. But with hindsight, what I realized and grew to understand was that I was projecting some of my internal world onto these other people, as if I was projecting the superego. I was projecting what I had taken in from my parents onto these other people, as if they are the critical naysayers as well and are setting me up to fail. That's also that's also how I experienced my childhood.
So Simon, you're describing those two states very clearly for us, and you're describing the projection of the critical part of you onto other people, which is the other thing we do. And what I'm really aware of is the other state, the middle state, the adult state, the state in therapy that we try to nurture and grow and feed and make robust, because it's that state that is going to negotiate between the protester and the abandoned one and the very critical one. So it is our adult ego that hopefully will say, you know what, Simon, I think you can do this. Your intentions are good. You have a plan. Let's go ahead. And I know the little one's frightened, and I know the super ego is frightened too, which is why it's getting so critical. But actually, we can feel the fear, and maybe we can just step one foot in front of the other with those feelings without being either frozen by them or paranoid by them.
So for me, Noelle, within that situation, my ego felt very squashed. My ego wasn't coming up trumps and negotiating and looking after that child part of me, keeping at bay the overly critical superego. I was essentially off duty, and therefore felt crushed in the middle of it all, left without a way out at the crux of the problem.
Oh, Simon, yeah, it's very difficult, and will be. I mean, it's familiar to me, and I know it'll be familiar to other people. Why do you think your ego wasn't quite up for the job? What had
So
happened to it?
again, yeah. So again, this has only become known to me through quite a few years of therapy and working in this therapeutic setting now. If I think of an expression that Donald Winnicott used, he spoke of the good enough mother and receiving good enough parenting, change some of the words, good enough nurturing. And sometimes I think that the soup I grew in, the family unit I grew in, was so troubled it wasn't able to put the right ingredients in. Not enough good nourishment went into my soup, my growing environment. It was very critical. Parents felt threatened themselves in their psychological worlds. The kid in me felt pretty abandoned or alone and frightened often. So my ego didn't wasn't given examples of how to negotiate, how to cope with uncertainty, how to be maybe fearful of uncertainty, but this is how we negotiate it. This is how we come back together again. This is how we make sense of it. Yeah. I didn't have those experiences. So my ego, until more recent times, was always squashed, often squashed.
And it takes quite a lot of work to make an ego fit, particularly if the early years have been troubled and you've had to grow a very super egoic state, a very critical state, because of course we grow that state to try and keep us safe. So the more unsafe it is when we're little, the bigger that state grows. And I know again, we say in hindsight, but I know you work very hard on yourself, Simon, and now have a pretty muscular ego, I think, an ego that can hear itself and balance things and to work things out. What we're going to do next is there is a little animation to follow with toolkits, but we're just going to go through kind of an emergency plan. So how to cope with immediate sense of feeling very anxious, very stressed, very unknowing, how to do that and how to take it forward so that we can contain the feeling of uncertainty and extreme anxiety and continue in life rather than just be frozen. Okay, so we have here how to make a plan. Stop and breathe. Allow your compassionate self to come forward. It is all right that you feel what you feel. So draw two circles. One circle is you and what is in your control. The other circle is what is outside of your control. There may be an overlap. Make a note of what is in control. Take each item and realize to yourself in your way that you have or can do about these things. Choose your best method to formulate a plan for those things that need action. For those things that are out of your control, well, they will remain in that circle out of your control. The fearful part of you needs to know that it is normal to be fearful, but that things out of our control have to sit and wait until something else changes. That is reality. There is no blame attached. So, part of drawing, making a plan is very important because we use our proprioception. That's our eyes. That's the way we look out. And that helps us calm our brain. The animation is going to pick up on this as well. So do a spirograph, make a list, make some notes. You don't have to keep everything in your head. You might want to move, take a walk, go for a cycle, have a stretch. Whatever it is, don't forget to breathe. Because when we breathe, we become back into our bodies. Mentally, or by writing or drawing, make a space that is your larder. So this is the space where you store everything that nourishes and supports you. Remember, your plan is scaffolding and it is not set in stone. So you can always go back and add to it. It's not the finished product. It's not the finished product. Simon and I have also got some toolkits and takeaways to give you just before you see the animation. So remember, the takeaways. I don't know is not uncertainty. It is an expression of defense. It is a phrase we use when we want to avoid, hide, or simply feel frozen and cannot think. It is not a true expression of uncertainty. Psychologically, we are made of many parts, including the id, the ego, the superego. We have contradictory feelings. We are messy. Our feelings are not black and white. Our feelings are complex data. They may be about the here and now or the there and then. Our job is to listen to the data, but not be pushed about by it. It is vital we have links of communication between our hearts and our heads. Please always remember, we are biological, chemical, and of course mystical. So the toolkit is simple. And there is a little, as I say, animation to follow. It is stop, breathe, acknowledge, and make a plan. So, just before the animation comes on, I'm going to say thank you so much to Simon for coming on to the film this afternoon, for sharing his experience, himself, his ideas. Thank you so much, Simon, for taking the time and the effort to do that. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And we wish you well, of course, and hope this film is of some help. Thank you. Your toolkit. Let's see what's in your toolkit. That's it, stop. Just stop what you're doing. Breathe. Breathe out longer than you breathe in. It'll calm you down. Now you can think. Move. It's always good to get into your body. It'll ground you. Now you can make a plan. So, notes on planning. The point about writing or drawing is that we use our proprioception. That means we use our eyes and brains to look out at detail, and that increases the cortisol in our brains, and that calms us down. Now we have a chance to link up our head with our hearts. That way we get wisdom. By doing this, your feelings become information rather than just something that will push you about.